This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to
We're watching here.
This is Opinionated Movie Talk with Chris and Perry. My name is Chris Williams. With me, he is the Tyler Winklevoss to my Cameron Winklevoss, Perry Seibert.
I've always wanted to be one of the Winklevi.
I know.
I'm so happy.
There are two of us.
It's the greatest insult of the decade in any film. The Winklevi. It's so good.
It is. We are going to be talking about the Social Network as part of our discussion about the career of Aaron Sorkin. He has a new film out called The Trial of the Chicago 7 that's on Netflix right now. But first, Perry, what have you been watching?
What have I been watching, Chris? I think this would be a good time for us to discuss the charms of Borat's subsequent movie film.
Oh, I'm always up for discussing that.
I went into this with my. Here's the thing. I think Sacha Baron Cohen's a genius.
Mm-hmm.
I love him. I'm not saying I love all of the work, but I am glad to entertain whatever he tries. I have a very difficult relationship with Borat, as I'm sure anyone who listens to us regularly could understand. There are things in that first Borat film that I think are fake. I think they were scripted, and I think they're played so as not to be scripted. And I find it uncomfortable that so much of it rests on you having to believe that it was all in the moment. I'm not saying it all was, but there are just things that bother me about it. It just plays in a way I don't care for. You know, I don't like it when documentaries play that way. I don't like it when fiction films play this way.
Sure.
They're pretending to be documentaries. What I loved about this is that I think with the exception of the Rudy Giuliani sequence, almost all of it was scripted. I refuse to believe that much of it at all was not at least set up or everyone was in on the gag. And it doesn't matter because the point of the satire in this film is so directed at the political climate right now. It has a much more focused gaze at what it is satirizing than the first one did. And so it finished and I was like, that's this. I never thought I would have this reaction. It's less funny than the first film. Mm-hmm. It's a better film than the first film. And I think it cuts deeper on the whole than the first film does.
Interesting. I definitely thought it was less funnier than the first movie. I'm a big Sacha Baron Cohen fan as well. I love the Ali G show, and I think I kind of doomed myself going into this one by brushing up on watching a few old episodes of the Ali G show, watching the first Borat, which my wife had never seen before, and that was an interesting experiment. But I
can imagine.
I definitely I see what you're saying. I do think the vast majority of this is scripted. And I think a lot of that first one is on a rewatch. I think you can see that a lot of that is set up and just framed a certain way. And it's more apparent here that this is, a lot of people are in on the joke. There's the guy at the Kinko's who obviously he's not troubled by the death threats coming in across his fax machine, and things like that.
Right. And the joke there is, like I said, the joke isn't in the first film. The joke would have been, "Wow, this idiot doesn't care." Mm-hmm. And in this one, the joke is that he's trying to accomplish this. The joke is about the story. It's not a candid camera laugh that he's trying to get.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of torn on it just because the main thing with me with Borat is I like to laugh, and I didn't laugh as much as this. But there were honestly emotions that I didn't expect watching a Borat movie. Like I think the relationship between Borat and his daughter, as weird and wrong as everything is, it's kind of touching. And then the whole sequence at the end with Giuliani, I did not expect to be feeling anxious during a Borat movie, like that type of anxious. Like, am I about to see a crime? And I think it is over time. He has, the whole joke of Borat in that first movie is not so much a political dig. It's how long can we have people be polite, right? It's how long is someone going to keep up this whole facade of I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to be polite, I'm going to put up with your shenanigans before they kind of push back. And this is more targeted at America today. And I think when it does hit, it hits harder. I just wish I would have laughed more, but it's a movie that I finished it. I wrote my review. I was like, yeah, it was what it was. And then just kind of seeing other people talk about seeing the impact it made, I've been thinking, oh, I might need to see this one again, because it really does stick when it needs to.
Yeah, I would go a step further and say that for me, the first one is even less about how long will I listen to this idiot than how can I put people in a position where they look as terrible as they possibly could. Mm-hmm. And this one does that, but it's not about the people sharing the scene with Borat. It's about how bad can I make this already horrific political situation look. And this is, to be fair and clear, this is an equal opportunity of offender of a movie. This is not. There are some spectacular digs mm-hmm. at victims you might not expect in this movie.
Yeah.
It's. I just think it's clear-eyed. It's sharper. It's a better film in almost every conceivable way. He's a better actor than he was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it is a pleasure, like you said, to realize halfway through this, oh wow, he wants us to actually invest. Mm-hmm. Like, he wants us to actually care. And that's fantastic that he would want to do that, and then on top of that, actually pulling it off.
That was a good. I did not even think of considering that for what we've been watching, because I think I assumed it came out before we had recorded our last episode, and it had not. But that I'm glad we got to talk about that, because that was a pretty big movie last month. So I'm glad we got to talk about that one. I've been watching one that I know you've seen as well, Sofia Coppola's new one, On the Rocks.
Oh, yay!
Which,
yes.
If you live near one of the dozen theaters in the country that's open, you could go and see it right now, or you could see it on Apple TV Plus in the comfort of your own home. This stars Rashida Jones as a woman who is beginning to suspect, that her husband might be having an affair. She is, kind of out of sync with everything because they have a young daughter, and she's beginning to, just see that parenthood takes her kind of out of the rhythms she's used to. So her father, played by Bill Murray, he decides they need to investigate this whole affair thing a little bit deeper, and they kind of go off on shenanigans across New York to track down the truth. I'm a huge fan of Lost in Translation, so I really was excited to see Sofia Coppola and Bill Murray work together again. This one surprised me. I felt like I think I went in expecting Lost in Translation Part 2, and I didn't get that. What I did get was a very enjoyable light comedy that has a more, it's a subdued Bill Murray, but it's still a very charming Bill Murray. In a performance that really just kind of shows how charismatic he is, but it's also, like Bill Murray often is. He's a man who's very, sad deep down. And I think Rashida Jones is very good as his daughter, who's just starting to figure out where the life is shifting under her, and she needs to figure out whether something's wrong or that's just the phase of life she's in. I enjoyed this. It's a very light, kind of a lark from Sofia Coppola, but I think it has a lot of subtlety that kind of lingers after the movie passes.
I really liked it. I love it because it feels like it does not feel autobiographical, and yet it feels very personal. Mm-hmm. This is, this is about this is Sophia's fictional take on what it is like to be the daughter of Francis Ford Coppola. It's hard not to read it any other way, especially if you've paid attention to the work of all of the Coppola children. Roman too. There are moments in Roman's films where you realize, oh, you're working out having an incredibly charismatic father. And and workout seems too hard a thing because it's not like they're upset about it.
Yeah.
They're just like, this is my experience. This is what this was kind of like. And I would like you to pay attention to this because I think it's worth saying. And they're right. It is. This is just a love letter to Bill Murray. Yes. What a gift of a role. It is so good. He is so warm and so charming.
There's a sequence where he talks himself out of a speeding ticket.
Yes.
And yes. It is the most purely Bill Murray scene I've seen in a long time.
Yes.
And she understands. I think she just understands the appeal of Bill Murray so well. She knows how to work the sad side when she needs to, but also that he is very charming. And sometimes those kind of mingle a little bit. There's also a scene where he sings to a restaurant, like these diners at a restaurant. He doesn't sing well, but it's so captivating because it's Bill Murray, and you just can't look away from what he's doing. And it really reminded me of I really like the Very Murray Christmas that they did for Netflix.
Me too.
What I like about that is I feel like that captures every side of Bill Murray that we like. There's the somber side. There's the kind of just charismatic lounge lizard guy. There's the guy who shows up at various parties and is just very inspiring. And I just think she knows how to work him very well. And it's just it doesn't, it doesn't go in the predictable route where they're fighting the whole time, or she's just, Rashida Jones is just kind of waving off her dad. There are moments of tension between them, but it doesn't, they don't overtake the movie. It's a much more complex relationship than I expected going in.
And the thing that surprised me in a not great way is her strength to me has always been her subtlety. She does not wrestle directly. She does not tell you what's going on. I mean, with Lost in Translation being the high point, it rests on a conversation we never get to hear. It doesn't matter. It's all about the behavior that leads up to that moment where they are willing to have the conversation. And I was thrown by the fact that their big confrontation in the movie is direct. Everything is laid out. There's nothing left. And I was actually sort of thrown by that, and I didn't like it. I was like, that's not that. It almost felt like some sort of like she lost faith in herself in some weird way. Not that it's a bad scene. It was just like, this doesn't feel like Sofia Coppola. But then, honestly, the last scene then turned that around for me when she goes home and has the last conversation with the husband after wondering whether or not he's been cheating on her throughout the entire movie, which has been the crux of the movie. The scene between Rashida Jones and Marlon Wayans is so good, and so it is direct. It is, everybody says exactly what they're feeling, but they're big feelings that are really, they are played at such a normal level. They are not heightened. They're not played for drama. And I was like, oh, good on you. Thank you, Sophia. You went to a different gear to land on, and I was impressed. And I just think she's been on a really good run. I seem to be the only person on the planet who really liked The Beguiled, her remake of The Beguiled a few years ago. I think she's been on a great run. For about 5 years now.
I don't even think I saw The Beguiled.
The Beguiled is a fascinating movie, if for no other reason than watch it as a double feature with the original, because you're watching Don Siegel, who was the least subtle filmmaker in the history of American film, and Sofia Coppola, the most subtle filmmaker of the last 30 years, tackle the exact same material, and it's fascinating to watch them both do it. They tell the exact same story, and they tell it entirely differently. It's really interesting.
I will have to track that one down. I really like Sofia Coppola, and I totally agree with the conversation at the end too between Rashida Jones and Marlon Wayans. It really, like, you're geared up for the movie to go one direction, and it it's a quieter ending. And yeah, I think it's one that, is a little more true to life and a little more emotionally complex than I think I was prepared for. Like, just it feels more real. Like the things you deal with in a relationship where you have kids. So that is On the Rocks. That is streaming now on Apple TV Plus, which I have to say, I think Apple TV Plus launched about a year ago, and I remember laughing at it because it came out with nothing on there except the morning show. And I just got to plug, like, there's some really good stuff on Apple TV Plus now. Between that, there are several documentaries I really liked, and I've been really obsessed with Ted Lasso. So that's definitely a streamer that I think is worth looking into. Well, we're going to turn our attention from one streamer to another. We're going to look over at Netflix now, which just about a month ago debuted The Trial of the Chicago 7, the new film from Aaron Sorkin. His second film as a director. This is the true story of 7 people who were on trial after the uprising at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. This stars Eddie Redmayne, Sacha Baron Cohen, Mark Rylance, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, and Frank Langella. And yeah, I guess, Perry, where would you like to start? Because I will confess that when I saw The Trial of the Chicago 7, I realized how much I had napped through social studies and knew virtually nothing about this story.
Oh, yeah. This is a famous trial that should be more famous than it is, quite obviously. There have been... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I had to Google just to see, like, there was a part of me going, this is really good, but some of the stuff in here seems really over the top. And then I Googled, and nope, that all happened.
That happened. There have actually been a number of cinematic treatments of this material already. There was a very good TV movie done in the 80s, and there was a really interesting documentary done by, it's the same crew that did The Kid Stays in the Picture. The Robert Evans documentary, that is an animated documentary. They actually they got really good actors to read the court transcripts. They just reenacted it verbally and then animated it. And that's really interesting. That's a film worth seeing. I think it's just called Chicago 8.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So this is material, this is historical material near and dear to my heart. I am fascinated by this period of American history. I always have been. And so I was very interested to see what Sorkin would do with this. I was coming at it in a very... there were a lot of things that were keeping me from being fully excited about it. Mostly, I was remarkably underwhelmed by Sorkin's directorial debut, and we'll get around to that more in a minute. But more importantly, I have said terrible, terrible things about Eddie Redmayne for years and years, and I thought, there is no way in hell he can play a Midwesterner. That is not going to work at all. And man, in 30 seconds, he's got it.
Yeah.
He is so good right at the top of this. I'm not going to take back everything I said, but I will say that for that 2 hours, I had no desire to punch Eddie Redmayne. And it was real nice to not want to punch Eddie Redmayne for the first time in a really long time while watching him in a movie.
I felt much the same way because I feel much the same way about Eddie Redmayne. He is someone who whenever he has shown up on the screen in the past, I have kind of tensed up and just been like, I don't like him. And I don't know why, but I just don't. And same thing. Like, I think he's really good in this. I think I think the heart of this movie is kind of the differing approaches from Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman. And I think he plays kind of a guy who isn't quite, firm in what his convictions are at that point, or how much he wants to push, his voice, or should he just, go along to get along and try and work change elsewhere. And he's up against, a very charismatic, very boundary-pushing man, played very well by Sacha Baron Cohen, mentioning him again. And I think their scenes together are some of the best in the movie.
Yeah, if you've seen... the exact flip happened for me with Sacha Baron Cohen here, in that the first 30 seconds he's on screen, I'm like, that's a terrible Abby Hoffman. I don't believe that's Abby Hoffman at all. First of all, he's a foot taller than Abby Hoffman. That shouldn't bother me, but it is. This isn't playing for me at all. And then I don't think it's not that Sorkin and Cohen had to get into the rhythm. You got to get to what the film is doing with Abby Hoffman. And then you realize, oh, no, that's really good. Mm-hmm. He's doing really, really good work in this movie. Sacha Baron Cohen is. Because it's not the playful, childlike Abby Hoffman that you're used to seeing if you watch a lot of old clips of Hoffman. I've seen Steal This Movie, the adaptation of Steal This Book, Hoffman's autobiography, starring Vincent D'Onofrio, did a fantastic Abby Hoffman in that movie. It's great, and it seems very lifelike. And this is very much an interpretation of Hoffman. And it's great that they always have him paired with Jerry Rubin, who's played by the dude from
Jeremy Strong.
Succession. Jeremy Strong, who's fantastic as well. It's great. They let Jerry Rubin have all the really big laughs. And he's fantastic. He's really good in this too. Everybody's really good in this. It's a really well acted film. So I was impressed with how well they put up these personalities. And I don't mean how much I think they're exactly like the real life figures, just setting up their purposes for the story that Sorkin wants to tell, which I think you're exactly right. This is a film about how do you fight power? Mm-hmm. That's the central question of this movie.
Yeah. Now I will say I like Jeremy Strong, but I felt like Jerry Rubin felt very caricatured to me. And I know very little about the real life guy, but it just seemed like a kind of a hippie caricature where everyone else seemed a little bit more full blooded. He basically the drama for him is that a girl he liked was a cop, and he seemed bummed by that. It didn't bother me, but it was definitely something where I didn't feel that character got the full rounding that Abby Hoffman or Tom Hayden got. But I mean, everyone in this though, like Mark Rylance is someone who I've loved watching him have this kind of late in life bloom as an actor. I always like it when he shows up, and he's used much the same way Spielberg uses him, as just kind of this voice of quiet decency.
Yes.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he has been off screen for a while until this year. And I liked him. He kind of did the Joseph Gordon-Levitt thing that he does. But I enjoyed seeing him again. It's a really strong ensemble. I enjoyed that. I think this is definitely one of those things. Like, this is a movie about, idealism, and it's a courtroom drama. And that really is just kind of the sweet spot for Sorkin.
Oh yeah.
Like this is a movie I wish I would have been able to see in a big theater with a crowd, because it is a movie that is played for laughs and cheers in different places. And I think it's one of those ones that would have been a lot of fun to watch with an audience. But we were really never going to get that anyway, because it was a Netflix movie. But I think that's just, Sorkin knows how to have smart people talk about smart things, but in a way that doesn't feel isolating. It feels very engaging and warm, and I think that's why people like him so much. Is it's smart without feeling like it's out of your league, even though no one ever sounds like a human being. They sound like
yes. He writes to a very catchy rhythm.
Yes. I think because I've been going through, and I think I told you this earlier, this was the most delightful research I ever did, was going through a lot of his movies, revisiting a lot of them, seeing two of them for the first time, and just the delight of watching these movies over the course of a week or two. And you get into that rhythm, and it's very noticeable. He has a very distinctive pattern, and it's like music. When they play it, it's like, oh, I know who wrote that. I know who did that.
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
But there was still something that like felt a little off to me when I finished it. And I couldn't quite put my arms around it, because I knew I liked the movie. I knew I enjoyed it. I thought it was very smart, very well acted. But there was something that I felt keeping me at arm's length. And as I watched other movies this week, I think I found out what it was undiluted Aaron Sorkin is a lot sometimes for me. Like it's a very strong thing to get a lot of without another director kind of tempering some things or filtering it through their sensibilities. And I don't remember much about Molly's Game. I know I saw it. I know I didn't hate it, but I was kind of like, whatever. It was fine to me. But it didn't really resonate with me at all.
Yeah, this is a step or 2 or 5 above Molly's Game. So I was really happy. I agree. It is a really interesting thing to think about what this would have done had it been a normal year and it played in theaters. Mm-hmm. Especially coming out at the height of a heated presidential contest. It really would have been interesting to see. I personally think, virus free, I think this would easily be an Oscar contender.
Oh yeah.
Because it feels like it feels like exactly the kind of political sweet spot the Academy likes to hit. And I mean that in a good way. Other people probably would think I mean that as an insult or would assume they would be insulted by such a statement. But no, I mean it in a good way. And I think that this was so much better disciplined than Molly's Game. And I mean literally in the actual words being spoken. He gets away. He trips over himself and falls in love with stuff he didn't want to cut in Molly's Game that is just problematic. And I'll get into the other things that are problematic about that film when we get around to it. But suffice to say, yes, and I understand where you're coming from. And for me, where it left me was so much higher than Molly's Game that I was like, all right, now you are ready to make a really great movie. You've made a very good movie. Mm-hmm. Now you're ready to make a really great movie. Go do it.
There's something he does in this, though, that I really liked. He does it twice, I think. And it's where he's going to connect from the courtroom back to the events at the convention. And it will be edited so that it's someone talking on the stand, maybe Abby Hoffman talking on the stand. It then flows into Abby Hoffman, speaking in front of a crowd. And then it cuts into the events at the convention. And I found that really, just a really powerful way to draw that line between the court case and what happened, and just in a very energetic way that I really liked it. Just hadn't expected it when he did that. I found that very effective. I think the question at it, not will they be acquitted or convicted, but what's the whole purpose of them all being on trial? Why are they there? Is it that they want their voices heard and this gives them a platform, even if it means it's going to torpedo their chances? Or are they there to get themselves out of this, get themselves acquitted, and then make change another way? And I think that tension feels very strong. Mm-hmm. Sorkin has said how he purposefully wrote and directed this so that it would have parallels to today. And you can look at this and you see this summer's protests and you see a lot of the things that came up in the election. And I think someone else, I know Spielberg was attached to this for a few years, and I don't know that it would have had that vitality. It would have been a very different movie in many ways, I think.
Yes, I think it would have been a much less interesting movie in a lot of ways, quite frankly. I like the raw sort of, and I love the story. I mean, Sorkin's been telling the story everywhere, doing press for the film about how, he came on board because Spielberg called him and said, hey, I kind of want to do this movie. And he was like, I think that's a great idea. Yes, let's do it. And then he had to go find out about the trial. He had no idea. He did not know this history. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, that's a fascinating admission to make. Let's see what kind of movie you make about that. Because I think that shows that it's not a polemic. I mean, it is, but not in the way you think it is. Yeah. It's not about celebrating these 8 people, 9 counting William Kunstler. But it works as a narrative. It works as a story piece, even if you didn't know the real story. This works, and it is interesting. He absolutely takes liberties that I think are, with all but one, perfectly acceptable. I have one little historical thing that bugs me about the movie, but I understand why it's there. Dave Dellinger never slugged anybody. Dave Dellinger was a pacifist. He really was a pacifist. He did not slug a guy in the middle of the trial while his son looked on, uncomprehending of such violence. That was the moment that was a little too on the nose for me, especially since it wasn't historically accurate. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's a really, like I said, I just think it's another really smart piece of work from him, and I am glad he got to do it. I'm glad it's not bathed in Spielbergian pathos.
Well, okay, now when I saw it, my first instinct was, well, I think Spielberg might have been able to tell a better story about the actual people, right, if that was his focus. But after this past week of going through Sorkin's films, I really want to go back and rewatch this, because the one thing it does so well that I think you see in all his movies, or most of his movies, is he's fascinated by ideologies and the conflict between ideologies and philosophies. And I want to watch it back in light of that, because I feel like I'll appreciate it more having just gone through all these movies. So I'm really looking forward to sitting down and watching it again. Because it is, whatever flaws it had, it is highly enjoyable, too. It is
very much so.
It's not a slog. It doesn't feel like a history lesson. It is funny. It is moving. I really enjoyed this. I think this would have gotten a lot of play if we were having, regular Oscars this year.
Yes.
But I think that sets us up nicely to segue into a discussion of his career. And I don't know if you want to go all the way back. I feel like A Few Good Men is where you have to start, right?
Absolutely. An adaptation of his play. Rob Reiner tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Let's go be famous, young man." And a hit movie was made. I remember seeing it at the time. I had no idea. I was completely unfamiliar with the play. I went on this cold. I remember thinking, well, that's efficient. I don't dislike the movie. I can't believe it was a Best Picture nominee. Back when there were only 5 nominees. I don't understand how this happened. Other than it is a very old-fashioned, straightforward. I'm sure I wrote a nice, polite 3-star review of it, which is exactly what I think it deserves. It is absolutely worth seeing. It will divert you for 2 hours. It has a little bit on its mind. I think it lays out very much exactly what would prove to be what Sorkin does best, which is to deal with some exceptions. He deals with, a whole lot of characters so that he doesn't have to go too deep with any of them, because I think he is. I don't mean this as negatively as it sounds. I think he's a very shallow writer. There's not a lot of depth in Sorkin's work most of the time. There are exceptions, but he's very comfortable juggling, like you said, lots of people with lots of opposing viewpoints and letting them talk in ways that are very entertaining to listen to. And all of that is on display in A Few Good Men.
What's funny is I grew up listening to my parents talk about A Few Good Men. They love it. Like they saw it, they bought it. Was a rare movie they bought, and they've talked about it for years. I would have been 13 when the movie came out, and I never got around to it until 2 weeks ago.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I had never seen A Few Good Men, and I would agree 100% with everything you said. I think it's very enjoyable. I think you can kind of feel his rhythm starting to develop there, and I think sometimes the actors have a little bit of an issue with the banter, like in the non-courtroom scenes. You can feel them kind of wrapping their arms around it. But it's highly entertaining, and it's all there for that scene at the end with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, which is so much fun to watch. I mean, I've forgotten how much fun it is to watch Jack Nicholson just go full bore screaming at someone, which is one of the great pleasures.
Oh yes,
and I like the struggle with Tom Cruise's character, which is like you said, it's shallow, it's surface, but it's still, I think he does a good job of portraying this guy who's kind of, been apathetic or a slacker, which is really a front for kind of insecurity, which I think comes back through a lot of Sorkin screenplays are people whose insecurity affects them and might put wedges between them and others, or might hold them back a little bit. I enjoyed watching that. I was the same way though. Like, oh, this was a Best Picture nominee. It's solid. It's a very solid, watchable, good movie. It's enjoyable. If I was flipping through and it was on TNT, I would stop and watch it to the end. And I'm sure it's on TNT all the time.
It is. It is not even. I had a really fun conversation with a dear friend this week, talking about a different movie altogether. Actually, talking about a television show, and we were talking about how it's so hard that there's no adult entertainment. It's either prestige or pulp. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in between anymore, and this is in between. That's what this is. It is supposed to be for people who want to think a little bit and enjoy, really rhythmically well delivered dialogue. Mm-hmm. He tackles his obsessions with power much more strongly in other stuff. It's there. It's certainly the central conceit of the play and the movie, but it's not a grand statement. It's a fun time hearing a story.
Yep.
And I wish there was more of that.
Yep. His next was Malice, which I have not seen.
I have not either, and all I remember is throughout my last 2 years of college, Alec Baldwin yelling at me from a TV screen, "I am God." That's all I remember.
Yeah, but that's just Alec Baldwin doing a Tuesday. But
Exactly. And I was like, wow, I think I know what this is about. I guess I never got around to it. I don't know why. I was in college at the time. I was busy, and I've never gone back for it. I don't know why. I would. I like Walter Becker. He's made some really entertaining movies. I just never have.
His next script was The American President, which was another one I had not seen until 2 weeks ago. And I really enjoyed. I thought it was just a nice, smart movie. I don't think, like you said, he's not particularly deep, especially when it comes to characters, and he has issues sometimes with female characters.
Oh, not sometimes. More than sometimes. Not all the time, but more than sometimes.
Yes, it's his average is not good on that. And I don't quite think, I don't think the romance in The American President really rises above Sweet. It's not the great love story. But what I didn't anticipate, and it's really, I think the thing that I love about Sorkin's writing so much is anytime you watch a movie about the president or about politics are just kind of this broad, nebulous thing, right? There's a country going to attack us. There's a politician we don't like who is coming against us. And he gets, you can just tell what he likes more than anything is to have a specific issue there. And he's having smart characters debate politics in a romantic comedy in a way that shows he's thought about it. He has opinions. He takes a side. This isn't one of those, partyless presidents that appeal, so the movie appeals to all bases. It plants its flag to, its ideology. And I think he has more fun writing those scenes than he does about any of the romantic stuff.
Yes.
And it was just a delight to watch them banter and watch them talk about intelligent issues in a romantic comedy. And I don't think you would have many movies like that today. I don't feel studios would say, this is a sweet romantic comedy with a lot of political talk in it that gets really nitty gritty. Warner Brothers isn't going to put that out today.
The closest thing you had was last year with the Seth Rogen, Charlize Theron comedy, which gets close to it. At least stresses a political ideology and is still a sweet love story, and arguably, yes, a better and deeper love story than
definitely a better love
American
story.
President. But yeah, I think for the most part you're right, and I think that dovetails really nicely with what we were talking about earlier, where we don't have a space for this kind of movie anymore, it seems.
Yeah, and again, I was watching it just thinking of Rob Reiner, because this is another one by Rob Reiner, and just this past weekend, my wife and I were trying to find something on HBO to watch, and we went back and we rewatched When Harry Met Sally, and what a hell of a run that guy had. Like, you look at that filmography, the 80s and early 90s, and you're like, wow, he was just going to make great movies forever, and then he didn't. And
well, and he did for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it was over.
Yeah. But man, when he was on...
When was it over?
Yeah. I think North was right before this.
See, I will go on record as saying I don't hate North. North doesn't work, but I see what North is trying to do, and I don't mind it.
You don't hate North?
I do not hate North. I actually really like the central message of North a great deal. The underlying story is, I think, really great. It is so weirdly told that it's problematic beyond belief. No, not even beyond belief. That's not fair. It's all a matter of whether or not you enjoy watching, really shticky old comedy stuff done through the perspective of a 9-year-old boy. If you think that's funny, you're going to be okay with this. Apparently, I'm okay with this at some level.
I can't remember if I am or not, because it's been years and years since I've seen that.
There are so many movies that are so much worse than North. I'm not saying North is good. I'm just saying of the films that you should spend your energy hating, it's ridiculous to hate North.
After this, Sorkin goes into TV for a really long time. It's like Sports Night, West Wing, and Studio 60 are basically his output. I remember Sports Night. I know I watched probably the first season of that. I was a little too young for it to really stick much, but I remember it got a lot of love from the critics and maybe not as much from audiences, if I remember correctly.
I think that's exactly accurate. Yes.
Okay.
It had a small devoted following and got rave reviews, and I watched it intermittently because that cast was so good and the dialogue was so much fun, and I ended every episode thinking, this needs to be an hour. This is exhausting. I love talking. This is too much talk in 23 minutes of network television time. There's not enough room to breathe. It's exhausting.
Well, then he gets his hour long with the West Wing, which really feels like it really feels like he went back to the American president, was like, that was fun. I want to do more of that. And I have
Let's drop the love story.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about policy.
Exactly. I think I've seen, up until a week ago, I had seen maybe 2 episodes of the West Wing.
Oh, you got to go through the West Wing for the first time?
I've started. I actually started right after election night as we're waiting for the results to come in. I'm like, I was done with the Sorkin movies, and I was like, I kind of miss that voice. I need to feel good about politics again. And so I started at the beginning, and I'm enjoying it so far.
It's great.
I don't know how I missed this one. I honestly
great.
don't. It would have been right in that wheelhouse when ER was on the same network, and probably, a very, not a similar show, but similar demographics are watching that. And I was a huge ER fan. So I don't know why the West Wing just never was one that hit with me, why I never gave it a shot. But I definitely am in now. It's all on Netflix, and that's been a great way to pass time. I can say I've seen several episodes of Studio 60, though, which is the one TV show until this year that I had ever written a review of, because I was so captivated by the pilot that I wrote that it was the greatest episode of TV I had ever seen.
Uh-huh.
And wow, did the next few weeks kind of make me feel embarrassed for that review.
Yeah, it's not good. And I watched every episode of it because I went from, okay, back up just a little bit. I was a absolute head over heels fanatic over West Wing the second it premiered. I would not miss an episode. I rearranged my life to make sure I never missed it. And I only bailed about half a season after Sorkin left. Because once Sorkin leaves, you can tell. I'm not saying it's a bad show at that point, but it's not the same show. Mm-hmm. And I went, I'm out. As much as I love all of these actors and this entire cast, except Rob Lowe, who'd already left, I don't have anything more to give to you. You're not going to get back to where you were. And I've heard that the episodes are very good. I have no interest. But for that first 4 seasons, whoo! Oh, you are in for a treat, Chris. You're going to enjoy this so much. It only gets better over seasons 2 and 3, and then 4. Yeah, you can tell the cocaine and mushrooms have added up, and it starts to take it. So I'm not saying it's terrible, but you can tell things are not well at home. The production is troubled because the writer is, gacked to the eyeballs and can't get shit in on time, and everybody's stressed out because it was the most expensive show on television. So it's, there are prices to pay, and it's worth it. The West Wing is great. I was so geeked for Studio 60. Sure, behind the scenes of Saturday Night Live, let's do this. And wow, it's so bad.
Yeah.
It's so, you're right. The pilot is fascinating. The pilot's not terrible by any means. But, he just doesn't know what he wants to say. And I think it comes down to the fact that, we've been getting around this, and I think I've said it obliquely in a couple ways. For me, I don't think his central thing is to talk about ideologies. His central thing is to talk about power. And it's all related to power. And he doesn't have a hook for power on television. The stakes aren't high enough. He doesn't present to you how powerful that show is in the culture. And so there's nothing at stake. It is just the relationships. It's not the ideology. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all.
And it's not funny. The show is... They're making a Saturday Night Live that is not... Well, okay, I guess today that's Saturday Night Live. It's not funny.
No,
but
I will have none of that. That's too easy. You're better than that.
But
come on.
It is, it's a... I think there were sketches where they were doing like Gilbert and Sullivan songs, like yeah. Just not understanding what that TV show was that the characters were making, and it didn't help that it came out the same season as 30 Rock, which had a sharp take on that, which wisely didn't show you the show they were making very much. And yeah, I remember Studio 60 tuning into it a few episodes into the season after I was kind of aware it was going downhill. And it seemed like almost it had turned into part-time war story. It just seemed very strange by that point.
He didn't know. I'm thoroughly convinced. He lost it a few episodes in and had no idea where to go. And so it flailed and went out with such a whimper. It's really not good. I'm trying not to be mean, but oh my God, why would you ever cast Sarah Paulson in a comedy? I don't decide. Sarah Paulson has a lot of skills as an actor. None of them involve making you laugh. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that we're spending. We've talked so nicely about people like Marlon Wayans and Aaron Sorkin, and we've spent so much time talking about this terrible, terrible show.
Well, the only other
TV
one he had was another one I haven't seen, which is The Newsroom. And I feel that kind of, from what I've talked to, it's more mixed, kind of better than Studio 60, people seem to say. But
by
maybe
far. Not
the West Wing quality.
That's exactly right. It is worth watching to watch Jeff Daniels in that lead part. It's another pilot that is, you will think it's the greatest hour of television you've ever seen once again.
I have seen the pilot because I have seen the America is Not Great speech, which is fantastic.
Yes.
But about the same time he's doing that, he's getting really interesting in movies again because Charlie Wilson's War comes out in 2007. I haven't seen it in years, but I know you have a lot of fondness for this one.
I have seen it numerous times. Under Sodium Pentothal, I might say it's his best film script.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's the best movie, but I think it's the best script. It is again back to his central theme, which is power. And in this case, how does one who is in a position of power suddenly realize how to use it? And that's fascinating. And he gives a supporting character to Philip Seymour Hoffman that is one of the greatest things you will ever see. Gus Stavros is one of my favorite movie characters, and he gets to deliver a speech at the end of this movie that, for me, is the deepest speech he ever wrote. It is a speech that I think of often. It is a speech that I try to live by. It expresses a sentiment that I think is exactly right as an approach to all of life. I forgive me for being flowery, but the film just worked for me the second I saw it. And before it gets to that point, it is funny. It is full of, true like door slamming farce of people going in and out of rooms at just the right time. It was directed by Mike Nichols, who was the only director who ever figured out how to use Julia Roberts interestingly, and she's really good here. Hanks is great in this, letting everybody else have a blast. He is straight man to everybody else here, and he's very funny too. I'm not saying he doesn't get really good laughs in this. I really love this movie, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. I think it's a really great movie that, again, gets at something really, really deeply humanly profound without being on the point about the politics itself. It's not about a particular ideology. It is, but it isn't. You could easily make this exact same movie about an issue on the other side of the aisle, and it would play exactly the same way, and it would be great also. I think it's a really great movie.
I have it in my Amazon queue, rented, and just did not have the time to sit and devote the 2 hours to it. But I think I'm going to go back and watch it, because I remember Philip Seymour Hoffman very vividly, having just numerous good, very profane lines. And I would watch it again just to watch him again, because
he's got an opening scene with John Slattery that is one of the greatest. Just the two of them are so good, and the dialogue is so much fun, and it ends on such a perfect comedic grace note. The whole thing is so good. It's just great.
I'm looking forward to visiting that one again. His next one was actually, it might be my vote for the best movie made from one of his screenplays. So earlier this year, we did our best of the decade list, right? Where we both announced 10 movies that were the best of the last decade. I did not have The Social Network on my list. I watched it again last weekend, and I am wrong for not having The Social Network on my best of the decade list, because damn, is that a great movie. That is just, I think, there's just something about Fincher, and he has a strong enough voice that he can kind of overpower some of Sorkin's tendencies. But Sorkin is writing smarter than I think he's ever written. And that duet there is just so fantastic. And it all rests, that opening scene with Rooney Mara and Jesse Eisenberg lays out every single petty rivalry and insecurity he will have over the next 2.5 hours. And it is just such a delight to watch.
It is. I agree entirely, and it is interesting in the Sorkin canon because it is the one time where his central character truly does talk like that and does not care who's listening. Like he's not trying to win anybody over. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's trying to win a certain somebody over and has no idea how. And that's what's really interesting. All of the Sorkin heroes are traditionally, they're attractive people. They're seductive people in the best sense. They are charismatic people who bring you into their world. And this is not a charismatic person. This is a person who drives people away. Mm-hmm. And he's real clear about that. And it is the least Sorkin-like story for that very reason. I find it fascinating that it's his. which is probably why it made the best movie out of all of them.
Well, and there's so much idealism in a lot of Sorkin stuff, and this doesn't have that. This is, I think this is where Fincher is really helpful, because he isn't as optimistic about people, and he is a lot colder. And he doesn't sand off any of the rough edges that their Zuckerberg has. No. And I think it makes it for a more fascinating movie. It's so much fun to watch. I think every performance in that I love. I love
yes.
Armie Hammer in that. I love Andrew Garfield.
Yes.
I think Justin Timberlake is used very well. I remember at the time thinking it was like a best supporting actor type role. I don't think that, because I don't think it's a great acting job, but it's a great use of Timberlake as the rock star that Zuckerberg kind of wants to be.
And I'm going to give Timberlake enough credit to know that that's exactly right, and that's what he was doing. Timberlake is a savvy performer, and I think he knew exactly what to do with this, or Fincher told him exactly what he wanted out of it. Fincher doesn't. As we've talked about the story from Zodiac, where Fincher made Downey Jr. and Gyllenhaal do things over and over and over because he wants a specific thing. And so I'm sure he tailored exactly what he wanted out of Justin Timberlake in that movie, and he was exactly right. And Timberlake absolutely gave it to him. I don't care for Justin Timberlake. I will give him full credit for what he pulls off in that movie. And let's face it, I forget who won the Oscar that year for Best Actor. Was that the year of the King's Speech?
I think it was the King's Speech. It was definitely the King's Speech. Yeah.
Damn. I mean. Oh, yeah. He's such a wonderful actor, but oh my God, Jesse Eisenberg is so good in that movie.
He is.
He's so shockingly good in that movie.
Yeah, and a lot of, anytime I have some issues with one of the movies Sorkin's been involved with, it's usually that, like I said with Trial of Chicago 7, there's something about undiluted Sorkin that sometimes just is a little too much. And I think Fincher is just he has such a specific voice that I think he can kind of temper those. And it's just interesting to see the give and take between the two. And it makes for a much better movie that way.
And I think it's interesting to compare it with the film right before it and the director right before it. Mike Nichols is one who can bring depth out of seemingly light material. And that's why Charlie Wilson's War feels so strong, that he knows how to amplify where there are much deeper things to dig at in a text. And that's an interesting thing to think about. As much as we want to we can complain about the faults of Sorkin, but oh my word, David Fincher, Mike Nichols, Danny Boyle, and Rob Reiner made movies out of his scripts. Mm-hmm. That's A-list directorial talent through and through.
Yeah, and I think my problem sometimes with Sorkin is it's just too much of a good thing, right? Like, I enjoy it. Anything I say that's kind of flaws, I enjoy watching them. I just always think it's interesting to watch the other directors who have filtered his work. Which the next film was Moneyball, which is another one where I think it's interesting to watch his script, which is, I think, it's his only co-writing credit, correct? Moneyball?
And it's a word and, not an ampersand. So he and Steve Zalian both worked on it separately. So who knows? I don't. And Zalian is a brilliant screenwriter. So I have never been comfortable knowing who did what on that script. And Bennett Miller himself is a fantastic judge of writing. Mm-hmm. And so he's absolutely credited on it. I'm sure he provided a lot to it. It's one that is hard for me to think of as his, although you can certainly see it's that power dynamic of someone who, this time we've got somebody who needs to figure out how to put himself in the position of power he supposedly has to change things, mm-hmm. which is, very West Wing-ish, but in a very different and way more singular way. This is one of the few films where he really does focus in on one person. and really tells, a single story and has to go deeper and is better for it. I really like Moneyball a ton.
I rewatched this early last week, and I had seen it in theaters. I think it might have even been on my top 10 list that year. Same thing. I walked away just really enjoying it. From what I remembered, when I saw it originally, I remember being very confused with the actual shenanigans between management and the team and everything. I don't know why I was confused. It's very easy to follow. I think that's another thing Sorkin does really well, is take complex things and make them very easy and engaging to follow.
Yes, it's the advantage of being of having great facility at being shallow.
Yeah.
Yes, it can make terribly complicated things seem very understandable.
But it is the one where I couldn't really pick out his rhythm, which I think might be that collaboration with Zalian. The dialogue in there, it's still smart, but it doesn't have that patter, and that's not something I mind. It feels much more grounded and realistic. And I don't know if that's that Bennett Miller just knew how to ground it a little bit more with the cast he had, or if it was the two writers and just the way the dialogue shook out. But it was fascinating because it didn't have that kind of, peppy banter, but it was really just, matter of fact, inside baseball speak. And I still would have liked to see what Soderbergh would have done with this, but I really like I really like Moneyball. And I had forgotten that it does end on a real melancholy note, just a little rough note that I had forgotten about. And in my mind, it had ended in a fluffy ending of him, thinking about his kid. And then there's the last notes to the song, "You're a Loser, Dad." Yep. And just how that really just lends that unsettling end that kind of ties into all the insecurities they built into Billy Beane for that. And I think Brad Pitt's really fantastic in it too.
And that feels way more like Zalian than Sorkin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or Miller, actually, than either of them. So that's why it's a collaborative art. I don't know. But yes, agreed. Pitt's fantastic. Jonah Hill's fantastic in it. And the scenes do have that banter. It's just a way slower rhythm. Mm-hmm. And they're just as funny. It's a really good movie.
Yeah, I'm a
big fan of Moneyball.
I enjoyed it. And then there was Steve Jobs, which that might have been the one that dropped a little bit from when I had seen it before. I think I had that pretty high on my best of list the year it came out. And I think there are some really great moments in Steve Jobs, but I don't think Danny Boyle quite gets his arms around it. And it feels very repetitive. The way it's set up is repetitive, but you can kind of it still feels very stage bound to me.
This is going to be really interesting. I agree with you, but I like it better than you do now, and not as much as you liked it then.
Oh, interesting.
I'm fine with it. It's another, for me, it is what we were talking about. It's one of the last gasps of a adult piece of entertainment. It's not, it doesn't have anything terribly deep on its mind. It doesn't cut nearly as hard as Social Network does. It's talking about what tech does. It also is responsible for, it's got a fantastic, that cast again.
Oh yeah.
Is fantastic. And everybody gets a really good scene, at least one. And the movie resulted in what I think is one of the greatest compliments ever paid to any screenwriter ever by anyone. And that was Andy Hertzfeld, who is played by Michael Stuhlbarg in the movie. It's a real guy. Michael Stuhlbarg plays him in the movie. And there were all this talk at the time about how the movie was made up so much stuff, because it does. It completely has this arbitrary structure that isn't real to deal with these real people. And Andy Hertzfeld was asked about that, and he told an interviewer, nothing in that film happened, and every word of it is true. And yeah. I think that's as nice a compliment as you can give to any screenwriter. That's exactly the job of a playwright or screenwriter in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, there are just the dialogue in that really is him in high gear, but then you have, I think it might be maybe the best cast there's been for a Sorkin script. I mean, you have Michael Fassbender. I think Kate Winslet's very good. I think Seth Rogen is really good in that.
Yeah.
I like Stuhlbarg. I like Jeff Daniels a lot in it. It is a very watchable movie and very smart. I feel like around the third iteration of the presentations that they even make a joke about it. Like Steve Jobs says it's like every 5 minutes before a product launch, people come back and air their old grievances. I'm like, yeah, that's what's happening, and I kind of feel it. But it's not enough where I would say I dislike it, because I like it a lot. I think that's where I can feel Danny Boyle kind of struggling to bring something new to it. And he tries. There are some really fun visual flourishes in that. I just don't feel he totally gets it, feeling not stage bound. But then again, it's a movie centered around stage presentation. So that doesn't bother me as much. And I really like, even though I shouldn't like that last scene, I feel like I shouldn't like that last scene with the discussion of the iPod. It really, it works. Somehow they make that work because it's a man who does not know how to communicate with someone except to make them something.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So I enjoyed watching it. I don't know if it would have been that high up on my top 10 list. It might have still been in it, but that doesn't matter because top 10 lists don't really matter. So
no, they don't. I have never seen it a second time. I saw it in the theater and really liked it, and I have never gone back to it. And so I'm almost interested to watch it again now, just to see what my reaction would be to it again. And color it. I am. It may have a lot to do with the fact that I remember the Ashton Kutcher Steve Jobs movie. And oh my God, thank you for not having that be the only depiction of Steve Jobs. Because, I'm not a huge Steve Jobs fan, but he does not deserve that.
No one deserves Kutcher.
No one. No one. Maybe Danny Masterson.
I will say that many of these films are available on Netflix right now. I think with Trial Chicago 7 out there, they have a lot of them on there. Molly's Game, Steve Jobs, Moneyball, Social Network, all on there.
You don't need to watch Molly's Game. You don't need to watch Molly's Game.
Well, let's talk about Molly's Game. Because I will tell you what I remember about Molly's Game. Because I saw it. It was one of those screeners I popped in one of those days, where you have 5 screeners you're popping in and watching one after the other. Yep. And it kind of just blended into the rest of the screeners I watched, except for Michael Cera basically playing Tobey Maguire. I remember that.
Bingo.
And I remember a really awful scene with Kevin Costner.
and to be fair, that is not Costner's fault.
No, it's just a really on the nose, like way too on the nose.
Yes.
And I think that any positive thoughts I had about the movie, they kind of got lost to that.
We have shared our distaste for Eddie Redmayne earlier. I feel much the same way about Jessica Chastain. I do not like Jessica Chastain, and it took me a few films to figure out why. Because I didn't have this reaction to her at first in her career. To me, she always looks like she knows she's being photographed. She knows she's being looked at. There is not a naturalness in her at all, and it's really off-putting to me. This is very personal. There is nothing wrong with her as an actress. I am not saying she's a bad actress. I'm saying she's a bad actress for me. She sets off fake bells for me constantly, and it just kills this movie for me right from the beginning. I'm like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you're a person. You're an actress being watched. You know it throughout, and it is it is made stark when Michael Cera's on screen, because that character is great. And just on the page, that character is great. If you care to do any research about the real life story, you'll understand why that character is great. Then the problem is I could almost get past all of that. And it's actually not the scene with Costner is not what bothers me, because that's exactly the kind of scene I would expect from a playwright who's very comfortable writing words, making their first directorial film and wanting something to make very clear what this whole thing is about. I cannot stand the Moby Dick conversation. That he interrupts the movie to have his lead character and the lawyer who have been talking through the whole movie have a literary conversation that they would never have, that has nothing to do other than to make some arbitrary point he's trying to make. And he does this again in Trial of Chicago 7, but does it much better. In the big payoff scene between the two main characters, they have a part of the debate hinges on actual English 201 conversations about how things are supposed to be expressed. And that's handled so much better there. He does the same thing with the Moby Dick conversation in Molly's Game, and it's where I tuned out. I was like, no, you don't have control over this. You don't know what you're doing here. It's a really poor directorial debut. It looks fine. There's nothing technically wrong with it. It's a bad script, and the scriptwriter should have known better.
Yeah, after this entire discussion we just had, I think maybe he should have known better. Yeah. And now that you bring it up, I did not remember that Moby Dick scene, but as soon as you brought that up, oh yeah, I remember that.
Terrible.
It grinds everything to a halt, and it's one of those things where look how smart I am. I'm going to toss this in there because I can. And yeah, so that was Molly's Game. I'm very glad Trial of Chicago 7 was much more well received by you. I like I said, I really want to go back after watching all these and rewatch it because A, I really did enjoy it the first time, but B, I feel like the flow will be a little bit better for me. But yeah, this was a very fun rewatch, and for two of them, a first watch for me. I love it's like putting on a favorite musician when you listen to his dialogue, and I'm very very happy that I have 155 episodes of The West Wing to partake in to get more of that.
86. He's done after 86. That's all you need.
Oh, is he?
That's all you need to do.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Well, that's a little more doable.
And now the only question is, will his ego be enough that he feels the need to direct the movie adaptation of his stage adaptation?
You're looking at his IMDb, aren't you?
Oh no!
Okay.
This is the question because the other I feel that if we're going to talk about the entire career, I do feel the need to talk about the two beyond Few Good Men, his two most I don't want to say infamous, but notable stage productions. Of course, To Kill a Mockingbird, which was why there was a 3-year break between Molly's Game and Trial of Chicago 7. Which by all accounts is very good. I haven't seen it. I haven't read it. I would be interested. I would especially love to see Jeff Daniels play that part in a movie. I am intrigued. I think it would be interesting to attempt to do it. I don't think it'll ever happen. I think his ego is not that great that he would feel that he could better this classic that everybody loves. But if you are unfamiliar with a project called the Farnsworth Invention, do you know anything about this, Chris?
I know it probably has something to do with TV.
It does. It was a play he wrote at the tail end of The West Wing. It was actually a screenplay that Tommy Schlamme, the longtime director of The West Wing, was going to make. It never happened, and he ended up refashioning it into a play. All I will say is, and a lot of the themes of that, and some actual, you can see the direct thread that goes into The Social Network from the Farnsworth Invention. But do some reading. Read up on the Farnsworth Invention. It has a very interesting history, and there's a lot of interesting things about what we were talking about how you take a real life story and what you do with it. That there's a reason it didn't become really well known, but it's still out there, and it is an interesting off ramp in the Sorkin career.
Fascinating. I will have to look into that. According to IMDb, the live presentation of A Few Good Men is going to be directed by Scott Ellis and Alex Rudzinski, and not Aaron Sorkin.
Krasinski. I know those names, and I don't know from where. But that doesn't surprise me. He doesn't know anything about directing live TV. He wouldn't want to do that. You got to have technical people do that.
Yeah, you need, and I think they were involved with. They were involved with Grease Live, which I did not see, but Alex Radzinski directed the live Jesus Christ Superstar for NBC a few years back, which I do love.
All right.
So maybe it'll be interesting.
I don't, but that's a better thing. I like Jesus Christ Superstar. I just don't care for that particular
I really like
version of it all that much. But that's me. I have my own issues with that show. There's things I need to have happen in that show, and they did not happen in that rendition of that show for me. That's all I'm going to say, and we'll leave it at that.
That's for our Easter episode.
Hang on, people. Just 6 months, 5 months away. We're good.
Oh, Perry, I think that brings us to the end of Aaron Sorkin right now. Where can people find you?
You can hear me every Friday morning on the Lucy Ann Lance Show on WLBY in Ann Arbor, and you can find me on Facebook. You can find me at Twitter at Perry Loves Film, and when you see the smoke rising from my remote control as I attempt to rewatch as many things I can on the Criterion Channel before it goes away every month, that's me. You can find me that way.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at Mere Christianity. And then I will just make it very easy. I put out a newsletter every Friday at criticisms.substack.com. You can read it there. You can subscribe, and that will link you up with any other writing and podcasting I do. So subscribe, share, and that'll be in your mailbox on Fridays. We will see you in 2 weeks.